A desperate silence descended on the galaxy. All of them believed it was humanity's last hour, until an unmarked human warship burst into the battlefield, cannons roaring, defiance on their equals. Hope bloomed anew in every breast. No sooner utiate calamitous cup than espied. Galactic maps were once filled with bright colors representing independent civilizations. Some ancient and wise, others militaristic and expansionist, even more peaceful ones happy to trade. But no chart escaped the halting invasion of an alien confederation that had rolled across every known sector. The Alliance's generals plotted their conquest with precise detail, targeting the resource worlds first, then choking the supply lines to ensure no species could mount an effective resistance. One by one, tenuous defenses gave way to hour after hour of unrelenting offensives. Humanity had fared no better. Sparsely populated with few pre-existing alliances, its outer colonies were quickly snatched away. From Infinity Jot and others came comments to the effect that despite their plucky nature, little was to be worried about. Humans were well outmatched on technology. Nothing the humans had was even close to a ship that could go up against the Alliance's dreadnoughts or the putative, unstoppable planetary siege machines other observers believed the Alliance possessed. The reports from battered outposts told of entire fleets extinguished in desperate last stands, supply stations overrun, and planet after planet bent to capitulation. The lines of communication were soon cut, and Earth itself was isolated. The Alliance's warlords, confident of victory, squeezed their grips around the last remnants of human space. For those humans who remained alive in battered strongholds, things had looked hopeless. Their proud fleet of battlecruisers were rubble and ashes. The remaining admirals and generals prepared for a last stand, aware that they did not have the forces or technology to stave off the next alien wave. The largest human station colonies became overcrowded refugee shelters, but every single day has brought less resources and dwindling hope. Families said goodbye and braced themselves for the unimaginable. However, whispers of salvation were circulating across these lands like half-forgotten legends. In hushed tones, the scattered defenders spoke of a warship built and bred in secret by human engineers who hadn't given up their ingenuity. Official registers contained no such entry, but those who believed grabbed on to every locally circulating factoid, that it came equipped with never-before-seen weapon systems, that its engines harvested untried energy, that it had a commander whose resolve matched the ferocity of the Alliance's entire pantheon of warlords. Most dismissed these stories as delusions of grandeur, the wild fantasies of a species cornered and desperate for a miracle. But then everything changed on a quiet day in the far reaches of a devastated system. The principal alien battle group loomed in formation on the other side of a human colony world that had once teemed with life. Their aim: wipe out the last defense satellites, turn the surface cities to rubble, and end them in that theater. Alien subcommanders, blinded by hubris, sent down orders for a swift, practical purging. Then as their capital ships dropped down, an unexpected warp signature flared on every sensor panel. The readings registered a single human-made vessel, coming from nowhere. For a time, the aliens disbelieved their instruments. One lone warship, dim, battered, and unmarked with any formal insignia, appearing in the wake of a whole invasion fleet? It felt like a gnat taking on a leviathan. But the readings were right. The hull shone with patchwork metal plating. Its dorsal spine was lined with odd antenna arrays. But the moment that was scariest of all was when it turned broadside and revealed massive cannons that appeared to be little more than improvised tubes. If it was a bluff, it appeared to be a weak one. That is, until those guns fired, reaching to launch dozens of sizzling rounds that ripped into the nearest alien cruiser. One instant later, that cruiser's shield shattered and fell, crumpled by the storm of ammunition in the way that a house, bombarded by artillery, crumples and deflates, and the ship exploded into a fireball that left the rest of the invading fleet momentarily stunned. Elsewhere, deep in a hidden underground bunker on the colony surface, a handful of human defenders stared at sensor feeds in disbelief. They saw the single warship signature flashing defiantly against a background of red enemy icons. They witnessed the destruction of the first cruiser and hoped, dared to believe, that perhaps the rumors were true. Despite the poor resolution on their images, so that it was almost like looking at Photoshop layers. In the limited audio, the watchers felt their adrenaline pump. There was a murmur that rippled through them. Could that be the rumored warship? Word rippled through every medium, through desperate human settlements, through alien warlords, even to those whose kind had long since abandoned the impulse to fight. One question echoed back. What's that ship, and how could it possibly contest the tide of indomitable hardware? The warship was a single ship, and its existence took 0 centuries of alien domination away. The Alliance's empire still stretched over countless star systems and had legions that could not be stopped. But the unlikely image of that singular vessel, defiant and deadly, was the kind of spark that ignites in a dark room. It shed light on one possibility that no one dared to imagine. Perhaps, just perhaps, humanity was not done after all. Perhaps some miracle had emerged from the ashes. This extraordinary machine was powered by a ragtag band of human tacticians, engineers, and commanders who had rebuffed every demand. So after all these years of directing the defense, the chief strategist brought that genius to the offensive plan. The lead engineer, said to have constructed starship prototypes in the dark, pleaded every bit of insight from his brain to create new weapon systems from the debris found from battles lost. The commander, who is said to have endured several near-death experiences, executed the maneuvers with unyielding resolve. Each member of that specialized crew brought the scars and memories of a galaxy that thought humanity had no future. They never called themselves heroes. Instead, they aggrandized their mission as the final, tenuous bridge between extinction and survival. If the warship's presence might force the aliens' hand, if it might inspire dispersed human forces to rise again, then maybe there was a way to ensure humanity's survival. To fail, however, would doom not just the vessel but the hope, even glimmer, that any humans might yet be free. So, with the reeling colony world shivering under the colossus of an alien invasion, that human warship coming out of nowhere roused all sides to wakefulness. For the aliens, it was an affront to their alleged invulnerability. It was a lifeline, however tenuous, for humanity. And for all other species, conquered, neutral, or otherwise, it was an indication that the cosmic order might not be quite so absolute as the Alliance had claimed. Thus opened a new chapter in a war that many thought was over. They assumed it was over, that humanity had run out of moves. But that mysterious warship arrived on stage, and the cosmic script was ripped in two, and a turn of fate began, one where the undersides had a chance to rewrite the fate of the galaxy. As soon as the warship fired its initial salvo, the alien invaders struggled to compensate. Their advance commander initially suspected it was a fluke, perhaps a retired dreadnought outfitted with avant-garde weapon systems. But the subsequent exchange of fire told a different story. Massive energy beams streaked from the turrets on the sides of the human ship to slam into a second alien cruiser, disabling its propulsion in seconds. They also set off alarms throughout the alien fleet, and action was taken immediately. Alongside the warship's command center, the commander monitored sensor displays, both calm and intent. The chief strategist made note of formations by the enemy, highlighting points of possible weakness. Alien maneuvers that had once seemed so routine now returned to haunt them. These had been the same enemies who had blithely steamrolled dozens of human fleets. But this warship, designed to outmaneuver and outthink conventional doctrines, would not fight the aliens' war. It made wide turns that confused standard targeting protocols. Its turrets spewed fire in erratic patterns, chewing through shield generators at impossible angles. Angry back and forths filled every open channel, while the alien admirals demanded an explanation. How had one human craft become so devastatingly efficient? A whole squadron of alien fighters flew in, raining down missile barrages that would have shredded normal vessels. The lead engineer drew on a newly attuned defensive grid, igniting it and bringing it to life. Little spheres of hardened plasma whirred around the hull, intercepting missiles before they could inflict a killing blow. 2 or 3 still slammed into the warship's plating, tearing ragged holes that vented atmosphere from unpopulated decks. The engineer cursed beneath their breath and diverted power to shield the weakened areas. The warship creaked in strain. No shield system was perfect, but she was still combat effective. Down below deck, Frantic repairs started almost as soon as the aliens' first salvo hit. Technicians scrambled with sealant foam and emergency patches to staunch hull breaches. Sparks poured from broken conduits, and the air smelled of ozone. But the crew moved with practiced efficiency, a testament to their training and their shared resolve. They had anticipated a punishing fight. However, it meant that every second of survival gave the warship another opportunity to continue its attack. Watching from a distance, a hidden cell of human defenders on the colony surface could hardly believe their eyes. Already for months they'd been forced to watch advanced alien battleships tear entire fleets apart in minutes. But then, high above, they saw one lone craft weaving in and out of blistering enemy fire. Every time the warship's engines flashed, it emerged at a new locus, battering the aliens' formation with railgun slugs and pinpoint energy strikes. These ground troops, skeptical at first, now cheered with every enemy cruiser that listed or blew up. Then there was the enemy's feared capital ship, a tall wedge bristling with long-range cannons. It joined in the fight, unleashing a barrage intended to overwhelm the warship's defenses. A warning readout flashed in over the sound of groans as the commander grimaced at the impending catastrophic volley. The chief strategist was quick to chart an evasive pattern, and the lead engineer was diverting auxiliary power to the thrusters. The warship plunged under the line of fire of the capital ship. The aliens' primary cannons fired wild, scoring empty space. In response, the warship deployed a barrage of specialized projectiles that attached to the capital ship's hull, each bearing an electromagnetic payload. Within minutes, critical systems went haywire. The gargantuan ship's forward guns went silent, making it a sitting duck. The alien admirals were surprised by such cunning tactics. They had trained for ordinary human tactics: pitiful charges, panicking ambushes, desperate stands. But this vessel embodied a high-end synergy of stealth, subversion, and in-your-face killing power. Angry at the impasse, the aliens redoubled their efforts. Reinforcements streamed in from the planet's other hemisphere, determined to surround and destroy the lone upstart. Realizing the danger, the commander executed a last-minute warp jump, timing it behind the largest concentration of enemy ships, causing even more confusion. Yet the warship was not invincible. Each new wave eroded its armor. Each glancing impact pushed the limits of its shield grid. The engineer's voice crackled over the intercom. "We're close to the threshold, Commander. Our primary coil is overheating. If it fails, we lose half our firepower." The commander grimaced, altering the battle plan. They needed a moment's respite to cool the coil, but the aliens were relentlessly on their heels, refusing to give any quarter. Inside the alien flagship, the sector warlord demanded answers from the apex of the war machine dominating the entire sector. The accounts from the subcommanders suggested that one human warship had delayed an operation that was supposed to be routine. The warlord did not believe it. How could a near-extinct species wield such destructive power? Had the humans developed new technologies in secret? Or was it a meticulously planned deception? There was a growing simmer of desperation among the aliens. They understood that if the warship broke through their lines here, the next front could falter. And if word spread, oppressed systems could rise up. Fear is powerful stuff, and the aliens now felt its sting. In a frantic rush, they scrambled more cruisers and heavy bombers to homing in on the warship's position, intent on snuffing out this threat for once and all. The warship's crew prepared for a fight that would surely test their mettle. A slew of alarming notice alerts popped. Cracked hull plates across several sectors, coagulating ammunition supplies for the long-range railguns, partial malfunction of stealth drive systems. The strain pressed across every deck. Inside the room, some crew members expressed doubts, privately questioning whether retreat was possible. However, the commanders stood firm. They'd come here to change the balance, to restore hope. It was a hopelessly convoluted plan, not just to save themselves, but the fate of every human colony still hanging on. There was also tension that came from within. A haggard comms officer referenced cries for help from scattered human enclaves in the other sectors. They had heard about the warship's success and pleaded for similar rescues. The commander heard these messages, eyes welling with sorrow. They knew they could not be everywhere at once. But all they could do was split the aliens' grip here, now. and maybe other worlds would take note. Well, at a critical time, the chief strategist concocted a bold scheme. If direct engagement by the warship was becoming increasingly dangerous, maybe an infiltration strike could blind the alien fleet. The strategist proposed a bold penetration by small boarding pods, each containing experienced commandos. These pods could latch onto enemy battle cruisers. They could gnash from the inside out. The commander reluctantly acquiesced, knowing that should the scheme fail, the pods would be effectively destroyed. Time was short. The warship turned sharply, pretending to pull away from the banding alien bombers. Under that cover, half a dozen pods were launched, returning to their old ways, skimming the chaos of the battle. Others got annihilated almost immediately by stray fire. Some of them were able to sneak through. A moment later, they affixed themselves to multiple alien hulls and ignited cutting torches that would breach airlocks. The warship was badly damaged, hammered from above by bombers in the process. The engineers struggled to maintain life support, sealing oxygen leaks as they arose. But success came in glorious jolts of sabotage. From the enemy's perspective, several of its capital ships suddenly had shields or main cannons fail. The sky was peppered with explosions as whole decks were put in vacuum. This alarmed confusion. Some alien commanders mistook it for a broader, large-scale strike. In the confusion, the warship was able to strike again, unleashing a withering hail of plasma beams that left 2 more cruisers adrift. In the confusion, the commander spotted a brief opportunity, a direct line to the enemy's main flagship. If they could take out the commander of this armada, the rest of the forces might fall apart. But the warship's reserves were nearly depleted. The primary coil glowed dangerously near meltdown. The warp drive trembled from strain. Schema. Basic FAQ. The commander assessed the danger. And if they unleashed their last, most powerful weapon, it might destroy the flagship, or it could knock the warship systems offline entirely, dooming them. It was a moment of crew unity in adversity. The strategist, the engineer, the weapons teams, the helmsman, each had contributed to a plan, a tightly timed chain reaction. If they launched a specialized warhead directly into the flagship's core as well, that might cause the alien reactor to melt down. But the warship had to risk bringing the shot dangerously close, risking the whole vessel. But their resolve pushed against the encroaching threat. To close the distance felt like crawling through a storm of knives. The alien bombers hammered the warship's hull, fighters strafed its unshielded sections, and flat cannons spewed hot metal in all directions. Instrument engineer transferred power from life supportive thrusters for a blip, trusting the crew oxygen reserves. The decks shuddered, arcs of electricity flickering across the walls as conduits exploded. But the warship held course. The commander was watching the targeting reticle coalesce over the alien flagship's primary reactor zone. The strategist walked through the final firing solution. Through the buckling metal and blaring sirens, a heavy warhead arced from the battered torpedo bay. For a moment, the entire battlefield appeared to freeze, all eyes pinched on the projectile racing across vacuum towards the alien dreadnought. A brilliant flash erupted when the warhead hit its target. The dreadnought's shields flared in a futile attempt to deflect the blow, but sabotage throughout its fleet had left it without reserve power. The reactor meltdown initiated almost immediately, and the dreadnought's hull broke apart in successive waves of flame. A shock wave rumbled outward with a deafening frequency. One by one, other alien vessels took to the air, fleeing the growing chaos and distance-wise away from the now empty site. The warship, battered as it was, lurched away, weaving through the shock wave with inch-perfect maneuvers. In the aftermath, the alien formation was in tatters. Many of their proud ships floated adrift, systems dark. The frigate hung there, engines on life support, black smoke pouring from several ruptures. The command center felt the weight of exhaustion and relief. The aliens had been handed a decisive defeat. For the first time in living memory, an invasion from the stars had been beaten back by human hands. But the price was apparent in every corridor. The ship's hull was badly wounded. There were enormous casualties to the infiltration pods, and the armaments were nearly depleted. And yet they had done the impossible. At one rare, pivotal moment in time, human ingenuity and determination had outsmarted the superior power of its oppressors. And now a question loomed. Could this victory turn the tide of the entire war? Or would the aliens regroup quickly, dispatching an even larger invading force? Still, the psychological jolt to the invaders was palpable. Nearby star system fleets justified disbelief in the wake of frantic communications from surviving captains. An unstoppable wave had hit an immovable object and lost. Those who'd long assumed humanity was doomed began to doubt everything for the first time. And in that battered warship, a glimmer of victory lit in the chests of all but the most worn out of souls. They had shown that defeat was not a foregone conclusion. What they did next would determine whether this moment of triumph felt fleeting or transformational, a turning point or a footnote. But in that moment, hope reigned. The galaxy, which thought it had put humanity out of the game, was soon to find that no hour was darker than when a single warship dared to stand against the tide. Those who survived on the colony's surface looked up in stunned reverence. Only recently had they been preparing for the coup de grace that would snuff out any remaining pockets of human life. It was the improbable victory of a warship, one now bloodied by the rain of shattered debris from alien battleships. Occasional cheers and sobs rippled through the rubble, while the freshly emboldened defenders rushed to re-establish communications with the victorious ship. Inside the warship, the commander and crew surveyed the damage they had visited upon themselves. The gutted hull had burned. Hull levels were unlivable, and life support was on the brink. The sick piled up at medical stations, and the engineers' beleaguered crew scrambled to keep the engines from falling apart. But somehow, against all reason, the warship had kept working, powered by a will of iron that would not accept defeat. On enemy ships that lived but lay broken, alien captains struggled with shock and rage. Many sent up distress signals to higher command, hoping for reinforcements before the irrefutable human warship directed its attention toward them. But the warship failed to pick off the stragglers. Instead, the commander refocused on scanning the colony's surface. There were reports that large areas of survivors still required assistance. Once bustling city centers were wrecked, their inhabitants without power, food, or medicine. The commander would not leave them behind. Cautiously, the warship entered a low ballistic and began searching for a secure landing zones. It was not without risk. If alien reinforcements arrived quietly, the warship would be a sitting duck, caught in the middle of gravity wells and possible hostiles. Still, the crew knew that part of their mission was to rekindle hope for any humans who survived. They dispatched shuttles full of emergency supplies. On the ground, previously terrified refugees gazed in wonder as those shuttles touched down, bringing life-sustaining services and a message. Your defenders are here. Despite this shattered why of the alien armada, other communities were simply left with uproarious joy, while still other communities couldn't fathom the idea and were still traumatized from their previous defeats. Yet each one who witnessed the warship's presence drew courage, and nearby systems, eavesdropping on the faintest signals, learned that humanity was fighting back and winning. At the far end of alien command, however, senior leaders faced a hard truth. They could no longer dismiss these humans as irrelevant. Advances beyond previous estimates of human technological capabilities had been reported by the beleaguered fleet. Strategic committees met to discuss whether to focus on expending additional forces or negotiating. No single consensus emerged. Others called for a massive counterattack. Throw everything they had at these upstarts. Some cautioned that such a response could backfire if the humans' cleverness was as potent as their new weaponry. The crew of the warship understood that a counterstrike was likely coming. In a darkened room, the commander gave a briefing, the chief strategist outlining various possibilities. They all knew they couldn't just disappear. The defeat here had awakened a hornet's nest. CG. If a greater force aliens arrive, the warship in that damaged condition can be destroyed. But the decision was unanimous. They would not run. Rather, they would strengthen the colony's defenses, unite scattered human enclaves in nearby sectors, and turn this foothold into a beacon for a burgeoning resistance. In an act of strategic genius, the strategist came up with a bold approach. Broadcast the warship's frequency on all known channels, but cloak the signal with decoy stream. This would serve two functions: to reassure all the scattered human settlements that salvation was possible, and to confuse the alien intelligencing system. The scheme worked even better than intended. Just days later, responses came from hidden settlements, sending encrypted messages that they were prepared to rebel. Meanwhile, alien spies had difficulty finding the warship's precise location. Sensing the tide turning, the warship's leaders made a bold move. They decided to hit an alien shipyard believed to be fixing more invasion fleets. Intelligence suggested that it was located only a few star systems away. If those ships departed the yards at full capacity, they could initiate retaliatory invasion. But if the warship was forced to attack preemptively, they could cripple the Alliance's immediate counterweights and buy time for a wider human insurgency effort. A second major offensive would typically require months of dockyard labor to repair the warship. They had mere days. The crew labored endlessly, begged, borrowing, and stealing, picked sprang parts from refuge from the wrecked alien vessels floating free in orbit. Members of the colony pitched in, crafting jury-rigged replacements for lost plating. The engineer had heavy bags under their eyes, but they worked on, determined to get at least partial functionality back to the warship's main coil. Fissures in the hull had been sealed with patchwork metal stamped out of fallen alien crafts, an ironic element that spoke to humanity's ingenuity, to its power to adapt and then turn an adversary's weaponry against it. Faced with these preparations, a small group of alien defectors who had become disillusioned with the Alliance's bloodthirsty expansion came with an unexpected hail. They provided inside information about the shipyard's security grid, who was on the lookout when and where. They were especially interested in the blind spots and the shifts, when the warship could slip in without being caught. This was dangerous information, which could be a trap. But after consulting with the strategist, the commander decided it was worth the gamble. In an effort to establish trust, these aliens relinquished their weapons and were escorted on board the warship. Once aboard, they exhibited true regret for their empire's conquests and an eagerness to atone. Armed with freshly gleaned intel, the warship set out on its next mission. Worried colonists waved goodbye from the half-constructed settlement, wondering whether they would see it again. As it vanished into the starry void, they held out hope that this champion of humankind would not let them down. The commander vowed in silence to return with reinforcements or die trying. Flying through the silent void of space, the warship brought with it not only the myriad of scavenged weapons, but also a rejuvenated cause. The tour, the leadership hoped, was snowballing. If they destroyed shipyard, more human enclaves would spring up. If more enclaves emerged, even more alien factions could defect or balk. The alien empire was built on fear and momentum. Sever either, and the whole colossus might totter. Firing the laser at the target system, the warship initiated stealthy cheating operations. The strategist had the vessel come into the shipyard from the dark side of a barren moon, utilizing its own electromagnetic field to obfuscate detection. The engineer adjusted thruster outputs to restrict energy signatures. Tension upon the bridge climbed to a new level when scanners reported no fewer than 8 warships in dry dock, each at varying stages of repair. A frontal attack was suicide, but the warship wasn't here to fight a pitched war. Instead, infiltration pods were launched once again, this time guided by data from the alien defectors. Moments before they believed an attack would begin, the warship engaged its thrusters, briefly powering them up. Sensors within the shipyard scrambled in response, the heavy batteries of the shipyard focusing on the incoming vessel. That was when the infiltration pods oozed into port corridors near the facility's primary reactors. The warship weaved through flak and laser fires, drawing attention away like a pro. In the dock, small teams of human commandos and alien defectors sabotaged coolant systems, sabotage charges meticulously placed near critical production bays. It was swift and ruthless sabotage, and despite the efforts of station guards to rally against them, the infiltrators set off a series of calculated demolitions. Bursts of flame and columns of smoke engulfed the complex, seizing the docking clamps that secured the half-repaired warships. With the station's defenses in disarray, the warship delivered a precision strike from a distance, aimed at the central power core. The resulting explosion reverberated through the complex and sent hull fragments flying into space. Great channels of the station crumbled, taking half-repaired dreadnoughts with them. By the time the defenders managed to mobilize any significant countermeasure, The warship had warped to the other side of the system, the infiltration pods safely stowed aboard again. In a single rating stretch, much of the Alliance's immediate response fleet was in tatters. The ramifications of this act rippled through the cosmos. News slowly returned to the colony, where jubilation erupted in newly united human enclaves. This warship, long just an improbable rumor, had now sent not one, but two hammer blows against an empire thought inviolable. The alien leaders called an emergency war council. Some called for a scorched earth policy. Unleash monstrous superweapons on any human world to shatter morale. Others warned such extremes would only more deeply embolden rebellious sentiment and ultimately splinter the empire from the inside out. The invincible juggernaut was now frozen by indecision, unsure how to combat an enemy that attacked quickly, disappeared, and then re-emerged with cunning unpredictability. The warship, battered once more, meanwhile had retreated to an undisclosed location for critical repairs. Messages from allies flooded in, from human militia groups to sympathetic alien dissidents. Encouraged by victory, the commander and crew knew they had sparked a fire. Though it was still a fight with no end in sight, the Empire had amassed an uncountable number of fleets. It was no longer a hopeless battle. With each skirmish, each infiltration, each sabotage, humanity's odds of survival went up. In that tumultuous storm of conflict, the unassailable, unyielding truth came home to roost. The Empire had miscalculated humanity's ingenuity, determination to bet the farm on a single craft. They thought it was the end for the Terran race. But out of the wreckage of past fights had emerged a warship that defied logic, and a vessel that fused desperate creativity with fierce devotion to its cause. The Empire now faced a shuddering stare into the possibility of its unstoppable reign being at risk for the first time. Deep in the shadows of the bridge, the commander caught a glimmer of a smile. They had shown that when all seemed lost, humans could change the ending. They had stood up to the worst and survived, at least so far. The battle turned, but the struggle continued. It was time to forge alliances, to build a real coalition capable of taking on the alien empire across the stars. This warship had already altered its fading future. In that moment, it might even alter the fate of a galaxy. In the weeks and months that would follow, the galaxy experienced a remarkable transformation. Asterisk enslaved nations found the courage to rebel against its alien overlords after hearing reports of a lone human warship successfully engaging in guerrilla campaigns. Lost within this menagerie, shattered human colonies that had once cowered in isolation began to form networks of trade and defense, cautiously reaching out to alien defectors who were growing weary of the Empire's totalitarian embrace. Waves of transformation radiate outward. Full star systems that had languished under occupation erupted in sudden revolts. Local alien governors, uncertain if the infamous human warship might be in their orbit, refrained from retaliating with full force. Some wanted to negotiate, dispatching tentative envoys to the freshly formed Terran alliance, hoping to avoid being the next victim of the cruiser's dazzling raids. A quiet but clear fear gripped the Empire's High Council. They had sought to conquer humankind with swift, gruesome finality, a plan that had backfired spectacularly. And now, they barely managed to bring together split fleets against an enemy that would not face them on traditional ground. Whispers began that even the Empire's own vassals might soon be thrown off, aware that even their former protectors in an epic of domination could no longer assure everyone of absolute safety. On the legendary human warship, an odd mixture of relief and resolve permeated the day-to-day life of all who served her. The lead engineer focused on incorporating newly captured alien technology into the warship's already eclectic design, trying to ensure they were always one step ahead in every encounter. The chief strategist oversaw distant rebel cells, mapping out potential future targets that would weaken the Empire's control. Despite the accumulating burdens of the growing pressures, messages of thanks from liberated worlds, and proof that more species were now part of the crusade, gave comfort to the commander, one extra moment before closing the receiver and continuing his errand. In small scattered Terran enclaves, civilians dared to dream once more. Children heard of the warship's daring exploits as if it were the stuff of a heroic saga. Refugees who had long accepted the reality of life under other sovereignty returned, rehabilitating their homelands. Factories restarted, this time not to build cheap widgets for an otherworldly war machine, but to produce new weapons, farming tools, and starship parts to support the emergence of a new free human civilization. At the heart of the empire, the generals who had once shouted with certainty that humanity had met its end now labored in shame and regret. They recognized that they were blind to the most important part of humankind, to the truly endless ability to adapt and survive. Time and again, humans had transformed adversity into opportunity, making unthinkable innovations under catastrophic pressure. The rush of conquest could not tide in this surprising bulwark, and once invulnerable leaders found themselves unsure where to turn next. Luminous through it all, the warship stood as a symbol of resilience. Whenever despair threatened in a conquered colony, news of a warship's impending arrival rekindled hope. The understanding that just one ship, strangely built, heroically captained, had changed the course of battle became a symbol of the effectiveness of sheer will. With each new victory, the alien empire's foundations quaked. While the path to final peace had not been definite, one thing had become absolutely central. They had believed it was the end for man. They thought the last battles had been waged, that the Terran spirit was crushed for all time. But as that unnamed warship roamed the galaxy, taking on foes much larger and sophisticated, it became the Empire's worst miscalculation. Humanity's desire to survive burned too brightly to be snuffed out. Ultimately, the warship's saga crossed star systems and party lines. It had a timeless message that no matter how dire the odds, no matter how absolutist the power of the enemy, a flicker of determination can burn into a flame that rediscovers destinies. For humanity, this was no longer a war. It was a renewal of hope. Okay, so the Empire might still wield fleets and armies, but now it found itself matched by a coalition united under the flag of one intrepid, improbable vessel. And with that the galaxy moved on, permanently changed. From where once a single species had teetered on the edge of extinction, an entire civilization sprang back to life. Where despair had reigned, a cockeyed optimism lit up every nook and cranny. And at the heart of it all, that human warship, scarred, unstoppable, revered, continued to streak across the stars, reminding everyone that boldness and bravery could indeed alter everything.